Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Kamma Daf Lamed Beis, Bava Kamma 32, but we're going to start on the bottom of 31b at the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Zeba bechaviso, Zeba bekoroso. Two people are walking on the street. One's carrying his barrel, one's carrying his beam. Nishbro kadu shalzeh bekoroso shalzeh. Guy with the beam they crash into the guy with the barrel. They're going to be patur under those circumstances because both of them have permission to walk there. No problems. But hayabala kore rishon, ubala chavis achron. But let's say the guy who's carrying the beam was first, and the guy who's carrying the barrel was behind him. And nishbra chavis bekora, if the barrel breaks on the beam, the guy with the barrel was behind him. We're going to say that the guy with the beam is exempt, Bekora Pater, Nishbar Chavis Bekora Pater Balakora. Then we're going to say the guy who has the beam is exempt because we're going to say the guy behind him was walking too fast and he crashed into him. But Ahmad Balakora, if on top of 32a, if the guy who owns the beam stops short, then Chayav, or he stopped when he wasn't supposed to, he stopped in a place he wasn't supposed to. Then we're going to say that the owner of the beam is going to be responsible. But if he warned the guy with the barrel, he says stop. Then we're going to say he's patur. Then we're going to say the owner of the beam is exempt because he warned the guy who owns the barrel. Let's say the guy who owns the beam was first, and the guy who owns the barrel was first, and the guy who owns the beam was afterwards. Then we have the same thing. Nishbra chavis bekora chayev. Then if the guy with the beam breaks the barrel, the guy with the beam is responsible because he was walking too fast and he was behind. Imamad bal chavis pater. But if the guy who owns the barrel stopped where he wasn't supposed to, then the guy who broke his barrel is exempt. But if the guy who owns the barrel warned him, he's chayev, he's liable. And so too, if there was fire and a flax, it's the same halachos as the beam. So basically, three basic cases. One is where they both have the right to be there, then neither one is responsible. But if second case is where the guy behind him was walking too fast, we assume if the guy crashed into him, then the guy behind him is responsible. If the guy in front stopped where he wasn't supposed to, the guy in front is responsible. If the guy in front warned the guy behind him, then the guy in front is not responsible. So So now we expand this out to matters between husband and wife. Let's say hamazik is ishto b'tashra shamita, somebody who damages his wife during the normal process of intercourse. Mahu, what will be the halacha there? Given the birshuska of it, well, since he has permission to have tashmish with his wife, we'll say he's exempt. Pater, Odelma, or maybe he should have been more careful. Amalei Tinisua. So Rav Huna responds to Rav Bar Nasan, why don't we bring a proof from our Mishnah? It says both have permission to go there. We're going to say it's exempt. He had permission to be there. Amarava, Rava says no. We're going to do a kal v'chomer the opposite direction. Umayar, just like when you, as relates to a forest, just as it relates to a forest, each one has permission. Just as it relates to a forest, each one has permission to be in the forest. And yet we're going to say if somebody kills a person accidentally in the forest, we're going to view it as though he entered into his friend's domain without permission and he's responsible. This man, it goes into the wife's domain. Well, Kol Shekain for sure should be responsible. So if that's the case, so if that's the case, the Gemara says, well, we learned that he's exempt because they both have permission to be there. So we say that if a person has permission to go there, he's exempt if he does the damage. So why in the case of the forest is he going to be responsible? So the Gemara says, Hasav Travau kadadininu. So the case in the Mishnah, we're going to say that they're both had the right to be there. And they both did the action. But in this case, we're going to say, so in this case, he's the one who he did the action, vihilo, and she didn't do an action. And so therefore, even though he has permission to be there, if he damaged her, he's responsible. Gemara says, vihilo, she didn't do an action. It's clear from the Torah that if she's engaged in adultery, she's responsible. She gets kares. So if that's the case, how can we say she didn't do the action? So the Gemara says, well, even though she didn't do the action, she benefited from the action, and so therefore she's responsible. Even though both of them are getting the benefit, but he's the only one who did the actual action, but she's getting the benefit, so therefore we hold her responsible as well, but not in the terms of damages, but in terms of criminally. So then we said in the Mishnah that if the Baal Korah was first, if the guy carrying the beam was first and the guy with the barrel was behind him, and then the guy with the barrel breaks his barrel, well, he's responsible because he was walking too fast. But if the guy with the beam stopped, then he's responsible. So Amar Rish Lakish taught that, let's say there are shtei paros, I won't say there are two cows in public. Achas revutza v'achas malachas. One is squatting, which you're not supposed to be doing in public if you're a cow, and one is walking. And the other one is walking. Bata malachas berevutza. The one who was walking kicked the one that it was squatting. Petura. Now we're going to say it's exempt because the guy was not supposed to be squatting. The cow was not supposed to be squatting. But let's say Revutza b'malachas chayeves. But let's say the one who was squatting kicked the one who was walking. We're going to say he's responsible. So Gemara says, Lema Messiah, maybe this is a proof. Let's bring a proof for Rish Lakish. Hayabal Korah Rishon, Bal Chavis Achron. If the guy with the barrel was first, and the guy with the beam was first, the guy with the barrel was behind him, Nishbar Chavis Bekora Potter. That if the barrel breaks on the beam, the guy with the beam is exempt. But if he stopped, he's responsible. If the guy with the beam stopped, he's responsible. But in this case, we're going to say that the owner of the beam who stopped is like the cow that's squatting that kicks the one that's walking. So, hold on, I lost my place. Well, so here we say that just like Rish Lakish said, that if there was one squatting and it kicked the one that was walking, he's responsible, even though the one walking was behind him. So to here also, if the Baal Korah stops, if the carrier of the beam stops and the guy with the barrel breaks into him, the owner of the beam is responsible. And so basically, isn't this a proof for Rish Lakish? Because the cow that's squatting is mishuna, it's unusual, and so therefore we're going to hold it responsible. So too in this case, the cow that's squatting is mishuna, so we'll hold that responsible. Mara says, "V'tizbar hasiyai by." You think that this is a support for Rish Lakish? Not only is it not a support, it's also a difficulty. That what's the reason why this cow that was squatting is going to be responsible? It's because it actually kicked. But if the cow that was walking behind him would have walked in, Rish Lakish is basically saying it'd be potter, even though it crashed into a squatter. But our case in the Mishnah is dimamela, is where the guy just stopped. He didn't actually kick him. The Katani Chayev. Yeah, we're saying he's responsible. So basically, our Mishnah is not a support for Rish Lakish, it's a question on Rish Lakish. So the Gemara says, Masnisin, our Mishnah is talking about a case that why is he responsible? The Pasco Orcha Kashilda. It's because the guy stopped in such a way that there was no way that the guy behind him could pass. So it's almost equivalent of the cow kicking. Hacha Kigon deriva b'cha gisa. But here in this case, the cow was just stopping one road. And so therefore the guy could have walked on the other side. So therefore the cow is only responsible for the guy behind him if he actually kicked him. Gemara says, but maybe we'll bring the support for Rish Lakish from the Seif of our Mishnah. Seif of the Masnisa Messiah Rish Lakish. The concluding clause of our Mishnah should support Rish Lakish. Why? Why should the concluding clause of our Mishnah support Rish Lakish? Because what does the concluding clause say? If the guy with the barrel was first, the guy with the beam was last, and Nishra Chavis Bekora Chayev, and then the barrel breaks from the beam, he's responsible. Vim Amad, because the guy behind him was walking too fast. Vim Amad Bal Chavis, but if he stopped, he's potter. If he just stopped, he's exempt. But in this case, the Kemalachas Beravutza Dami. So in this case, it's like the guy who was walking crashed into the cow that was squatting. Vikatani's potter. And we're saying he's exempt. And even though he's exempt in this case, because he didn't actually, so we're saying that the Malachas, the one that was walking, crossed into the one that was squatting. And we're saying that the one that was walking is exempt, is the one that was walking is exempt because the other guy stopped. And so therefore this is just like Reish Lakish. So the Gemara says, hold on one second. So in this case, the owner of the barrel stopped and the owner of the beam crashed into him. So we're looking at them like the cow that was walking that is kicking the one that was squatting. So remember what Reish Lakish said, that Malachas Beravutza, the one that was walking, kicked the one that was squatting, he's exempt. And so too, that's similar to this case, because basically the owner of the barrel is not, owner of the beam is not responsible for breaking the barrel because the guy with the barrel stopped. Mar says, no, Masnisin Diki Orchai Kamisagi. Our Mishnah is talking about a case. Our Mishnah is talking about a case. Our Mishnah is talking about a case where the owner of the beam is walking in the normal manner and he crashes into the guy with the barrel who's stopped. And so therefore we don't say he's responsible because he did it in the proper way. But Hacha with respect to the cow, Amrway, the owner of the cow that was squatting could say, yeah, you have permission to walk upon me. But it's not approved for Rish Lakish's position because I never gave permission to kick me. You kicked me. So therefore, you don't have the right to do that. So therefore, he's going to say it's not necessarily approved for Rish Lakish. And okay, so now we're up to the next Mishnah. Two people are walking in public. One of them is running, and one of them is walking. And where both of them are running. Excuse me, and they damage each other. Both of them are going to be exempt. So Gemara says our Mishnah that says that if one of them is running, the other one is walking, they're still exempt. It's not like Isi ben Yehuda, the low Isi ben Yehuda, Tanya Isi ben Yehuda, Omer Ratz Chayev. One who's running in public, if he crashes into somebody else, is actually responsible because you're not supposed to be running, you're not supposed to be jogging on the sidewalk. So therefore, if one guy was jogging and the other guy was walking, the guy who was jogging, according to Isi ben Yehuda, is responsible. But Moda Isi be'erev Shabbos ben Hashmasha shu pater. Isi would agree that on Friday afternoon, after between sunset and nightfall, ben Hashmashos, the guy who's running is exempt. Because he has permission to run, because he got to get home for Shabbos. Amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha ki Isi ben Yehuda. The law is like Isi ben Yehuda, that during the week the one who's running is responsible, but on Shabbos he's exempt. Gemara says, "Umi Amar Rabbi Yochanan hachi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha kastam Mishnah." The law is like an anonymous Mishnah. V'tanan echad ratz v'echad mahalech. It says in our Mishnah, if one was running and the other was walking, Oshna Yishnei Ratz in Peturin. So how can Rabbi Yochanan be arguing with our anonymous Mishnah, which it sounds like Isi ben Yehuda is doing? So the Gemara says, no, Masnisim erev Shabbos bein hashmashos. No, actually, that is the scenario of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is referring to a case that one guy was running on Friday afternoon after sunset. How do we know? Mimai. How do we know that's the case? I mean, the Tani will show you Shnei and Ratz and Petur. It says, well, if both of them are running, they're exempt. Well, Hasu Amli. Why would you need to tell us that if they're both running, they're exempt? We just said if one of them is running and one of them is walking, that the guy's running is exempt. Shnei and Ratz and Mibai. For sure, if they're both running, they're both exempt. So this is how we tie up our Mishnah. If one is running and one is walking, is exempt. When do we say this? Be'erev Shabbos ben Hashmashos, on Friday afternoons. But if it's during the week, but if it's during the week, then one of them who's running and one of them is walking is going to be responsible. Shneim ratzin, but if they're both running, afilu b'chol paturin, and even during the week they're going to be exempt. So Amar Mar Modi Isi, but Isi himself would admit Be'erev Shabbos Bein Hashmasha Shel Pater Mipnei Sherash Bereshus Be'erev Shabbos. It is permission to run on Friday afternoon. So even Isi would say that if one guy was running on Friday afternoon, he's allowed his permission to run. My Bereshus Ika. Why are you allowed to run on Friday afternoon? More explains to the Rabbi Chanina. The Rabbi Chanina on top of 32b. Bo v'neitze likras kala malkasa. That Rabbi Chanina used to say, "Come out, let's go out and greet the Shabbos queen, the Kala Malkusa, the queen who's a bride." The Amrile Likra Shabbos Kala Malkusa. Some say we'd say, let's go out to greet the queen, the bride who's the Shabbos queen. Rabbi Yana Misate, if he would wrap himself, the Kai, the Amar Boi Kala Boi Kala, he'd say, come, my bride, come, my bride. Why is the Shabbos called a bride? Marshall explains, because every other day has a pair. Sunday is Monday, Tuesday is Wednesday, Thursday is Friday. But Shabbos is left by itself. And so therefore, this is what Rabbi Shimon Chai said. So Hashem said, I'll tell you who's your pair. Bnei Yisrael. So the Shabbos is like a bride marrying Bnei Yisrael. That's what we do on Friday night. We make the chuppah. Just like on the chuppah, you have a cup of kiddush. You do kiddushin, and so therefore we're doing kiddushin between Shabbos and the Bnei Yisrael. This is the source that you're supposed to go out to greet the Shabbos queen. This is what the Ari took in the 16th century as the source of the fact that that we go out. Means say we can't wait for Shabbos to come. We go out to greet the Shabbos. We go out to greet the Shabbos.
The greeting of the Shabbos is part of normal.
The greeting of the.
It's optional in the sense that you should have prepared already earlier.
Yeah.
But this is a form of preparation.
Exactly right. This is so. Therefore, it's a mitzvah to do. Therefore, you're allowed to run to greet the Shabbos. Exactly right. So now the Mishnah says, so somebody's chopping wood in public. And while he's chopping the wood in public, he does some damage and the wood chips fly into private. Or the opposite, he's chopping in private and it goes into public. Or if he's chopping in private and it goes into another private domain. And in all these cases, Chayav is responsible. Says the Gemara, we need all three cases. The Tana, because if we just add we just had the case where he's chopping in private and it goes into public, we'd say, why is he responsible there? The Rabbi should have been more careful because there's everybody walks in public. And so you should have known that. And so therefore, we're going to say you're responsible. But from public into private, people don't walk there. Aim low. I might have said you're not responsible. If you said from public to private, I would say, well, I'm responsible. You did it at the start without permission. But from private to public to where you're doing it with permission, aim low. I might say you're not responsible. And if you had these two cases, I would say I'd say one case it's because it's very common. In the other case, it's without permission. but from one domain to the other domain, but I would say from one domain to the other domain, from one private domain to the other, where there's no people, there's not a lot of people, and initially you have permission, I might have thought that it's not prohibited, that you're not responsible, alone. So therefore, we need all three cases. Tana Rabbanan, anichnas lechanuso shel nagar. Let's say you enter into a carpenter's shop, shelo bershus, without permission, v'nitza bikas v'tavcha panav, and a wood chip flies out, strikes you in the face, umeis, and you die. Pater. We're going to say under these circumstances, the owner of the shop is going to be exempt. We're going to say he's pater. He does. What does he mean by exempt? He doesn't have to go into exile. He doesn't. Normally, if you kill somebody accidentally, you have to go into exile. In this case, we say he's not. He doesn't. But if he enters into the shop with permission, chayiv, he's responsible. What does it mean that he says he's responsible? If the guy entered into the shop with permission, okay, so Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says he's responsible for the four things. He has to pay nezek, tzar, ripoy, and sheves, pain, damages, medical expenses, and lost wages, but he's exempt from exile. Even though he entered in with permission, the owner is exempt from exile. Why? Because it's not, in order to go into exile, you have to be similar to the case of a person whose axe killed somebody else in a forest. It's not at all similar to the case of the forest. Why? In the case of the forest, both of them went in with permission. In this case, in this case, this person went into his friend's yard, so it's not the same thing. In the forest, both of them went into the forest independently with permission because it's a public space. But in this case, the guy walked into the carpenter's case with actual permission. So therefore, the carpenter doesn't go into exile. So Amar Rava says, wait, it should just be the opposite. In the forest, they both walk in with intent. And we say, and we view it as though you went into your friend's yard, the goer, and he goes into exile. This guy who walked into his actual friend's shop, for sure should go into exile. So now we have to explain what Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina is saying. Why is he exempt from exile? The Gemara is going to give several explanations, not all of them on today's daf. So says Rava, my pater migalos. What does Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina mean when he says he's exempt from exile? The person who kills him, the carpenter, was so close to killing him intentionally, it was karav amazed. So he doesn't have the right to go into exile, which is a form of repentance. That's what he's saying. He doesn't have the right to go into exile. Why does Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina say this guy can't go into exile? So because it's almost like intentional, it's accidental but close to intentional, so he doesn't get to go into exile. Before the Gemara goes on with other explanations of Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, the Gemara says, wait 1 second. If it's accidental, Gemara goes on a little tangent. You mean to say if you accidentally killed, but it was close to intentional, you don't go into exile? So Masav Rava challenges this idea. What about the case from Maseches Makos, where hosted for Ritzua Achas, if the guy whipping him, the person who gets lashes, gave him one extra whip, and he dies, I raise a go al yado. He goes into exile. This is like a case where the guy was almost intentional. He gave him an extra whip. He should have realized the guy would die. I raise a go, and yet he goes into exile. So it's against how you're interpreting, how Rav is interpreting Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Shimi min Ardai, the type of minyana. No, it wasn't that he gave him an extra whip. It was just that he miscounted, and that's why he gave him the extra whip. So Tavachai Rabba B'Sandalei. So Rava was not happy with that answer. He patted Rav Shimi min Ardai's shoe. Amar Lei, Atu Hamani. Do you think to say that the guy who was whipping him was the one who was counting? Vatanya Gadol Shabatayanin. Korev Hasheni Monev Hashlishi Omerika. We're going to the Bryce. So the head judge reads from the verses. The second guy counts, and the third guy strikes him. So he clearly wasn't the one who was counting. Elam Rav Shimi Minardai. No. So what are we talking about here? What's talking about here is the Ta Dayana Gufe, that the guy who was counting made the mistake, and he is the one who would go into exile. So Meisvei, we challenge this because we're challenging Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina's idea that the guy who was that Rava's explanation of Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina that the guy who was accidental but almost intentional still doesn't go into exile, because what about the following case? Somebody throws a stone into public and he kills somebody, he goes into exile. Here it's like a case of also almost intentional. He still goes into exile because he should have realized this. He should have realized there are a lot of people there. And still, the Katani Areza he goes into exile. So Amar Shmuel Bar Yitzchak, Besoser as Koslo. In that case is referring to where he broke his wall down. So therefore, it was an accident. He didn't throw it in, it was just his wall collapsed, or he knocked down his wall and it killed somebody. So the Gemara says, well, he should have been looking. Well, Gemara says, no, but so he broke it down at night. So, of course, at night also he has to look. Gemara says, no, but so is kosel b'yom. No, he broke the wall during the day, and he put it into a place where there was garbage, and so therefore he's not worried that there was somebody going to be there. That's why it was an accident. Gemara says, "Hi Ashbei Chadami. What's the case where this is trash? If there's a lot of people there, well, then we're going to say it's intentional. And if it's not a lot of people there, onasu, we're going to say it's a total accident. So Amar Papa will ela ba'ashba suyeli panos b'layla. Now we're talking about a case which the trash was usually used at night. People went to the bathroom there at night, but not during the day. And then it just so happened to be that there was a guy sitting there going to the bathroom during the day. It's not intentional because typically people don't go to the bathroom there during the day. But he's not an accident because there are people sometimes who go and sit there. And so that's the first explanation, Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, that why is he exempt from exile in this case? Because the guy should have realized the carpenter was so responsible because the guy was in his store, and so therefore he was almost intentional, and therefore he doesn't go into exile. And the exile is a gift to the person who kills accidentally, that he gets to go and repent. Okay, we'll have to stop here for this beautiful daf, and God willing, we'll review this at 8 a.m. and God willing, we'll pick it up again. We'll continue. Okay, everybody have a great day.